something that the NLRBU has advocated for is for outreach funding, which of course the agency doesn't have now.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Our first guest today is going to be Joseph Webb. He's talking to us because he works for the National Labor Relations Board, and the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, is the executive agency that is tasked with enforcing the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA, which, among other things, ostensibly protects the rights of working folks to organize. The NLRB has been flat funded since 2014, which means that in real dollars, according to the NLRB union, it has seen a 20% cut. That's under both Republicans and Democrats. Biden's budget that was released last week proposed an increase, but even that increase doesn't reach the inflation-adjusted baseline from 2014. So we're bringing on Joseph Webb. He is an attorney with the NLRB in Birmingham and president of the NLRB Union Local 10 to talk to us about this. So, Joseph, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, yeah, we're glad to have you. So before we jump into, how the budget cuts have affected your ability to do your job, let's talk a little bit about your job first. Help us understand what the NLRB does.
Well, you set a very good precedent of what ostensibly our goals are, so I can kind of just dive into the meat of it that way. But what we do, our primary goal is to protect the right of employees throughout the United States to freely choose whether or not they want to be part of a union. So our most important task and what we consider priority number one is the facilitation of free and fair elections and overseeing those elections and enforcing rules to ensure that the freedom of choice is not improperly interfered with by third parties. Whether that be employers, which is our most common case, but every once in a while we do have some bad actors on the union side that will step in, and we have to deal with that as well. And other than handling petitions and counting votes for elections, the other way we go about enforcing the act and enforcing this freedom of choice is the handling of unfair labor practice charges, whether that be discrimination against employees for standing up for each other, what's known as protected concerted activity when there's not a union involved. Just say, if you and I work together, for example, and we were caught talking about wages, and one of us or both of us was fired, that would be the type of thing that we would handle and call that protected concerted activity. We handle, though, of course, discrimination against individuals for union activity, or where employers discriminate against employees for their union activities. And we handle cases where employers fail to bargain in good faith with the union. And we handle unlawful rules, threats, pretty much the gamut of what you can imagine that an employer or a union may do to try and interfere with somebody's free choice in the workplace and the right to exercise and rights from forming a union, filing grievances, working together in an informal setting to try and improve your working conditions. Those are what we're focused on protecting. And as a field attorney, my primary duties are to handle the investigation and prosecution of unfair labor practice charges. So I am one of the people who investigates charges that come into the agency or into Region 10, and then where the regional director finds merit to those charges, I'm one of the attorneys assigned to prosecute whoever the offending party is. And I do some elections, but usually the leader on elections are our investigators, known as field examiners. So they end up handling the primary responsibilities on the elections themselves. And then the attorneys will handle the heavier load on the unfair labor practices. At least that's how it's traditionally been supposed to work. But with this lack of funding, as I'm sure we'll talk more today, those lines have been blended significantly over recent years. Also, the NLRBU, which I'm here on behalf of today, that's who I'm speaking on behalf of, the National Labor Relations Board Union Local 10, that I'm the president of, the local president of. And that covers Nashville, Birmingham, and Atlanta offices in Region 10. And that consists of everything from the field attorneys, such as myself, field examiners that we talked about, and also administrative professionals, which you may refer to in your workplace or have heard of referred to as paralegals. They're the same. They have the same type of responsibilities as a paralegal would in private practice.
Gotcha. And so, you mentioned when you were talking about your example of an unfair labor practice would be, you said firing, but it could also be disciplining of workers who are talking about wages. And that's something that a lot of bosses will tell people like, oh, no, we don't allow you to discuss wages. But that's illegal. It's illegal to tell employees that they are not able to discuss their wages and working conditions with their coworkers. Like you said, it's a protected, concerted activity. How do you feel the average Alabama worker's understanding of their rights are as a worker? Like, do you feel that most people have a good grasp about like what kind of rights they do and don't have in the workplace?
Unfortunately, I do not, and that is something that the NLRBU has advocated for all through Region 10, which covers much of the southern United States, is for outreach funding, which of course the agency doesn't have now. But the dream and goal is to get that kind of funding to where the agency can do formal outreach, whether it be commercials or even website postings, Facebook ads. Hey, did you know you have the right to discuss your wages in the workplace? And like the example you used, disciplining, any form of discipline for discussing wages would be illegal. But even telling employees, hey, you can't talk wages here, that by itself is an unfair labor practice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's what are some other things that you think off the top of your head that folks, when you're thinking about rights in the workplace, that folks don't even know that they have?
That you can't be discriminated against for contacting a union or supporting a union or advocating for a union. None of those things are illegal, and you cannot be legally retaliated against for doing any of those things. You can't be retaliated against for discussing workplace safety with your coworkers or for advocating on behalf of your colleagues in meetings with your supervisor. You can't be retaliated against for that. You can stand up for each other, and you can seek help from third parties, such as forming a union or whether it's filing charges with us. If charges are filed with us and somebody is retaliated against, that triggers what is called a violation of Section 8A4 of the National Labor Relations Act, to where even coming to us is protected activity that you cannot be retaliated against.
Why do you think it is that that people just have such a the understanding of the rights that you're given in the workplace is so minimal?
I think it is a combination of factors. It is the speaking as union local president, I think it can fall a little bit on the agency not having the funding for the outreach that we were talking about. I think it can fall on organizations, private organizations, needing to outreach to the community better, whether that be civilian advocacy groups, labor organizations. And I think the large part is that the people in charge of the government and the people in charge of workplaces, they do not find it advantageous to let people know about their rights. And I think that's one reason that there is not a general NLRB notice of rights guaranteed to be posted or required to be posted in every workplace unless and until an employer is caught violating the act. There's not a general advance notice that the NLRB has the right to post like some other agencies do.
Right. Yeah. So, these are a lot of things, and of course there's more than that, but there are a lot of things that people ostensibly have the right to and that are violated by their employers daily. What can you give us an understanding of your workload in the Birmingham office where you work? Like how many cases do you see week to week, maybe month to month, or year to year, is whichever makes the most sense, and what kind of cases do you see most often?
The NLRB Birmingham office processes upwards of 300 to 500 cases per year is the best number I can use. Currently, I have 21 cases is how many I currently have that I am processing at this point. And the most common cases we see are unfair labor practice charges. And so investigating those charges is what we see the most, but the most time-consuming charges are often the election petitions. So election petitions, we get several dozen of those a year, and you might as well call one R case the equivalent of 10 unfair labor practice charges. So that would be a separate number, 300 to 500 C cases, and then 2 to 3 dozen R cases per year. And the R cases are petitions, and we just call them R cases because that's how they're numbered in our files. And then unfair labor practice charges are C cases. And the C cases, I would say that unionized workplaces with with different type of bargaining issues and disputes would be the most common type of charge, with the second most common being discrimination in both unionized and non-unionized settings.
Right. So, I think that's a good segue into how these budget cuts are affecting your agency. I was talking to you before when we were planning to talk about this, and you said that your office historically has like 10 employees, and you've been at 4 for 7 years now. I mean, how does that affect your ability to do the work that needs to be done?
Well, the good thing I can say about the Birmingham office and all of my fellow unit employees in Local 10 is that we are all dedicated to the National Labor Relations Act and to protecting employees' rights. So the quality of work doesn't fail, doesn't fall behind. What does fall behind is we're not able to process these cases as expediently, because where it has historically been considered a heavy caseload for any single employee to have more than 9 cases at a time. Every bargaining unit employee in Region 10 right now is carrying close to 20 cases per person. And investigating these charges, we make it a point to truly determine the facts of a case and find out whether a person's rights have been violated. So after somebody files a charge, they get contacted by us, and we take a sworn statement from them first to get their side of the story and to get any contact information for witnesses, get any documents they have. And then we initiate an investigation on our own. we contact other employees from those areas. We don't tell them who we've talked to. We keep it confidential who we've talked to and why we're even contacting them, other than just the general allegations. So they know a charging party's identity is not revealed during this investigation process, but we're contacting witnesses, getting documents, forcing the company to respond to the allegations, provide documents. And this is a very drawn out process. I would say that each case, typically even if caseloads are low, it takes several weeks to months to properly investigate a case thoroughly. And because of this load, this just means that everybody is set back on the time scale. So to thoroughly determine whether people's rights have been violated, how best protect an individual's rights, what type of remedies they may be owed, persons who were typically hearing from us in 30 to 60 days on the outcome of a case, it can be 90 to 120 and worse, which the longer somebody goes with justice delayed, that can often be justice denied. They can have any multitude of things happen that affect their ability. And of course, we at the bargaining unit employees that are NLRBU members, we always try and minimize that as much as possible. So I would say that who suffers the most is the quality of life of NLRB employees in the region, and the fact that we're salaried employees, so we're not entitled to overtime, but we are, although we're typically open 8 to 4:30, it is not uncommon for agents to currently work late into the night and on weekends to try and, as quickly as possible, investigate these charges, prepare litigation for these charges, et cetera, to enforce people's rights. But it just becomes for everybody that it's a breaking point and somebody gets left behind because we don't have enough people.
Right. I didn't realize that y'all wouldn't be entitled to overtime or at least or anything like that. Since we're both federal employees, I just kind of assumed that that it would be basically the same, because I can get overtime if I need it.
Right. I cannot get overtime, and then NLRBU employees cannot get overtime. We do get comp time, which can be added to our leave. But the trick with comp time is that we have to know in advance that we're going to accrue comp time and get that pre-approved. And often, because of the way investigations work and when witnesses are available, we just don't know in advance of when that comp time is going to accrue. So we end up having to work to get the job done in times that can't be compensated in comp time under federal regulations, and we're not entitled to time and a half pay or standard overtime.
Huh.
So,
that's wild.
Yeah.
Sorry, that just kind of threw me for a loop. I figured it'd be the same because I my agency, I think that I've never had to actually, thank goodness, I've never actually had to work like more than 40 hours since I've had this job. But I think that there's a standard, but we are like statutorily able to either get time and a half or comp time. I think that there's one that our supervisors prefer, but we are able to do that, or at least standard overtime. I know, because I know that people do that. But anyway,
I will clarify, administrative professionals in the agency can get overtime. That is an option for them to elect.
Gotcha. So that is that's a big deal, like on all sides of this, because, you're talking about cases where potentially somebody has been fired, right? Somebody's been fired because they've been discriminated against for their union support, or illegally retaliated against for maybe discussing wages and working conditions. And somebody who's fired who, waiting around for this case to be, people can't wait around. They've got to get a different job. And then the remedies under the NLRB under the NLRA is for the worker to be made whole if the employer is found guilty. Talk to us about what being made whole means, actually.
Being made whole has historically an undercurrent NLRB law is called restoring the status quo. Means the discriminatee is offered the opportunity to come back to work with back pay plus interest for the time that they were out from work after they were illegally fired, up to the point that they are reinstated after the employer is found guilty. They're entitled to back pay plus interest for what they should have been paid over that period of time. But historically, that has been it. Now, the current general counsel...
That's minus wages that you receive in the meantime, though, isn't it?
That's correct. That is minus interim earnings. So it is not... people have, like you said, people have to get other jobs. So it is significantly reduced oftentimes by interim earnings. And sometimes people find better jobs, so they end up getting very little in total back pay paid to them. Now, it is public record, so I'm not sharing anything here. And, of course, I'm just here today on behalf of the NLRBU. But the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board has made public an initiative to try and change the remedies for violations of the Act to seek what are called make whole economic remedies, meaning if people suffered consequential damages such as falling behind on mortgage payments or went bankrupt on credit cards, those type of things caused by the unlawful layoff, that they would be entitled to be fully remedied for those consequential losses as well. But that is still pending in court. We will see in time whether the judicial system agrees that needs to be part of the make whole remedy calculation. Right.
The General Counsel has put out a lot of initiatives that I think would bring the enforcement of the NLRA closer to its original intention. How have bargaining unit employees of NLRBU Local 10 and other workers at the NLRB across the country, how have they reacted to one, the General Counsel's seeming interest in reinvigorating the NLRB, and then two, the continued flat funding by the Biden administration last year of the NLRB? Like, these seem like two very, like this is the same administration doing it, but, the Biden administration continued to flat fund the NLRB last year. So, how are NLRB workers reacting to those two things?
Well, of course, I can only speak on behalf of NLRB bargaining unit employees in Local 10, but within Local 10, there has been a very positive reaction to the initiatives to try and reverse the Peter Robb years, the Donald Trump years that really restricted our ability to advocate for employees' rights. We all believe in the original purpose of the Act, so we are all thrilled to try and restore that and expand upon it. We know with the current makeup of district courts and the Supreme Court that even with having a favorable board, many of these issues on appeal to the circuits and to the Supreme Court it's going to be an uphill battle. We're going to be in this fight for the long haul. But there is a lot of optimism in expanding employees' rights within at least the bargaining unit of Region 10. However, it is very depressing for the bargaining unit to see continued flat funding. Right now, the agents or the region does not have enough employees to do the work that needs to be done. We have numerous vacant positions in every office in the region. Most of our supervisors over these 7 years have retired, so we don't have supervisors to assist us. We are the unit leading the unit in most cases. We are just sharing the load together. There is no supervisor, for example, in Birmingham. Most of the supervisors in the Atlanta office are gone. All but one from Winston-Salem is gone. So it is just an incredibly depressing load to bear. And for as long as the funding is flat, the agency cannot afford to hire anybody to replace these people. So they can't hire new bargaining unit level jobs. They can't hire or promote supervisors to fill supervisory positions. And they can't, right now, the agency cannot even afford travel. There was a big dispute recently where Birmingham unit employees needed assistance for an election, and the regional director for Region 10 wanted to send 6 employees from another office. And the general counsel said, we don't have the money to afford that. We can't send help. We can't afford it. Right. So that's the type of thing we're dealing with. There is not enough people to do the work, and there's no way to access help because nobody can travel.
Right. And just to give people an understanding of what are the numbers that we're talking about, what's the ballpark here? The flat funding has been at $274 million a year, right?
Right.
$274 million a year. Biden is proposing to increase it by $45 million a year. And he proposed a similar increase last year that was ultimately discarded. And at the same time, we're looking at year over year. I mean, every year that Biden has been in office, every year that Trump was in office, every year that Obama was in office, we're looking at defense spending increases of tens of billions of dollars. I mean, like, the amount that you need to fully staff, of course you can always do more, right? But the amount that we're talking about here is minuscule when we're looking at other parts of the budget.
That's right. We are a teeny tiny agency on the budget scale. Small but mighty is what we call ourselves. And you'll see in the Build Back Better bill, the funding is proposed in it that is close to what many in the bargaining unit and NLRBU has advocated for, which is $350 million over the course of every 5 years on top of what we have now. So that would be about $75 million per year, $70 million a year, excuse me. I'm a lawyer because I'm not good at math, but $70 million a year is really, that's what we need to get to full strength. But even that 45 would be an infusion into both the strength and morale and the staffing of the agency that would feel like Christmas come early if that 45 million increase came.
What is the NLRBU doing to make sure that this is a priority for the Biden administration?
Well, the NLRBU, I know the national, routinely meets with the general counsel and her team to make sure that she is advocating and communicating messages directly to the White House. And of course, as made clear in the Huffington Post article, she was not pleased that this funding was discarded either, and she continues to publicly state that the funding level is unacceptable and untenable for going forward. But the NLRBU has engaged in many acts to send the message to D.C., various forms of protected concerted activity, refusing to volunteer for additional projects any further, refusing to volunteer to help supervisors carry the supervisory load, which has been growing as more and more supervisors retire. And unit employees had often volunteered that, hey, everybody, for example, everybody in Local 10 has just taken turns rotating. Okay, from these dates to these dates, I'll do those duties. And one of the acts, protected concerted activity, after the budget failed to pass this year, was that every member of Local 10 emailed the general counsel and the deputy general counsel and publicly withdrew our willingness to continue to participate in those rotating acting stints that they and the administration have to figure out how to cover non-unit duties that we're not going to help with anymore. So everything from our own protected concerted activity, as you may know, that's not typically a right granted in the workplace, the term protected concerted activity, but it, in addition to union activity, is recognized as part of our collective bargaining agreement that our union has with the agency. I think because it's the agency that enforces protected concerted activity that everybody agreed to that. But the biggest thing, at least for Local 10's experience, the problem is not the people within the administration of the agency. It is the people beyond. So the efforts to get that message to those people, whether it's contacting our congressmen, our senators, which we all do, and which we all advocate for them to back our funding more. But even when we reach out, as Michael said, the Republicans are interested in killing this agency. So as long as you're in a state represented by Republicans, they don't care what you have to say. But the NLRBU's experience and bargaining union's experience with the change in the last three administrations is the Republicans, as Michael Billick of the National Union said in the Huffington Post article, Republicans seem much more passionate about killing us than Democrats do about saving us, is how it feels within our agency.
Playing political pundit for a little bit longer, how do you feel about the budget increases, chances of passing through the Senate and the House this year?
Well, I think just speaking on my own behalf and on behalf of nobody here other than myself, I think that it will depend largely on what Senators Manchin and Sinema do. If they will get on board with the budget and pass it, then it will pass, and there will likely not be a need for a shutdown. If they can find some sort of budget resolution, they'll be able to pass it with the increase in there. But if they can't do it through some sort of budget resolution and get those two on board, or if they go through a route to try and get through a filibuster, it will not pass. There has to be a budget reconciliation measure with the support of all 50 Democrats for that funding to come to fruition.
Joseph, is there anything else that you thought would be good to talk about before we let you go?
I think you've covered it well. I appreciate your time today. I would just like to encourage all of your listeners, if you believe in labor rights and the right to organize and want to enforce those rights, want to make sure those rights continue to be enforced and that people have somewhere to go to enforce their rights, please contact your senators, your congressmen, write letters, and advocate for the NLRB to be funded, because the employees, the bargaining unit employees, have tried for 7 years now without success to get people to listen to us. So at this point, it will take a movement from the public to ensure the long-term viability of the NLRB, in my personal opinion.
Joseph, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.